Today I'm here to talk to you guys about my favourite books of 2023, best books of 2023 if you will. So I have split this up into two sections. First we have honourable mentions, so these are books that I rated 4 stars, 4.5 stars that didn't quite make my favourites list, and then I have my absolute favourites of the year. Some of those, to be fair, I did rate 4 or 4.5 stars, but they've left more of an impression on me. They're not necessarily all-time favourites. I think in a few years I probably wouldn't put them at the top of my recommendations list, depending on what you're looking for, but I think they're really good examples of what they set out to do, so I wanted to include them in my favourites list because they are really good and I do love them. So without further ado, let's start with the honourable mentions. First of all, I have I Must Betray You by Ruta Sepetys. This is an author who I have been reading from since her debut. She released Between Shades of Grey like at least a decade ago, I think. I received it as part of a travelling book box. I can't really remember what all of that entailed, but I do remember that people used to send their arcs around the world and share them with fellow readers, and you sort of signed up to receive one and eventually you would receive it. So I signed up for that, and that's the one and only one I received from that, I think, and it was a fun project. And what I'm trying to say is I've been a massive fan of Ruta Sepetys ever since then. When I saw that she was releasing a new book in 2022, I nabbed this one up. This is the story of a 17-year-old boy called Christian who is living in Romania. It's set in 1989, which is around the time of the revolution, so this book is leading up to Romanians protesting and wanting to become free of their dictatorship. Ruta Sepetys writes historical fiction, and she tends to cover areas of the world that us Westerners don't really hear much about. So I have no idea about any Romanian history, or I didn't before I read this book. I didn't know Romania had a revolution. I didn't know everyone was so oppressed there, so I'm really glad that I read this book, and that's why I've chosen this for the honourable mentions, because I only gave this 4 stars, but I think for some insight into this particular period of time, this is such a great book, and I would recommend that everyone reads this. It's YA, so it's perfect for teenagers to learn a little bit more about Eastern European history and how World War II was still affecting many countries 40 years later. I also wanted to mention A Flicker in the Dark. This is an adult thriller book. This is Stacey Willingham's debut, and since I've read this, I've realised that Stacey Willingham is a real hit for me. I've read both of her books now. She's got another one releasing in January. So this one is about a woman whose name I can't remember. I never can. She has a somewhat traumatic past. Her father has been imprisoned for being a serial killer. Basically, he killed people in their small town and was found out and convicted for it. But then all of these years later, I think it's set like 20 years later or something, the main character that realises similar things are starting to happen again. So young women are being killed. I thought this one was very atmospheric and very tense the entire time. Yeah, I wanted to mention it because it's a really good thriller book, and very few thrillers stick with me, and this one prompted me to do a full review video, so if you want to go and check it out, then definitely go and look on my channel. I will leave it linked down below. Another thriller that I wanted to mention, but a slightly different one, is I Am Still Alive by Kate Alice Marshall. Kate Alice Marshall is also one of my favourite authors. I've read through her entire backlist this year, apart from her newest book, The Narrows, and this is actually her debut, and it was absolutely fantastic. So this is a survival thriller. The main character goes to live with her father, who left the family quite a few years ago to go and live in the Canadian wilderness. So she goes to stay with him, and then he gets killed. I'm not going to tell you how he died or anything, but it's basically about the main character in the before, leading up to her father's death, and the after, where she has to survive on her own with a dog in the wilderness. It's absolutely incredible, and I'm so impressed it's the debut. This is definitely one that I will reread in the future. This is also super sad. I will warn you that it does contain a lot of animal death, and obviously with a teenager whose father dies and surviving in the wilderness, there's a lot of gruesome stuff happening. So be cautious going into this, but I would highly recommend it. It's such a good book, and I really enjoyed Kate Alice Marshall's writing. Also on this list is Legends and Lattes. So this isn't an all-time favourite of mine, which is why it's not in my favourites list, but for what it does, it's such a good book. So everyone describes this as a low-stakes, cosy fantasy, and I would actually argue that the stakes are actually quite high. So this follows Viv, who is an orc, and she used to go around with her friends fighting people, and now she wants a quieter life, so she decides to open her own coffee shop. And the stakes, I would say, are quite high because she is starting her own business from scratch in a town that she doesn't know. She doesn't know anyone there, and she has to sort of build her own community. And then there is kind of an antagonist throughout this book as well. So it's not necessarily low stakes, but it's not a difficult read, and it won't necessarily get your like pulse racing and have you on the edge of your seat, but you do come to really care about Viv and all of the other characters in this one. My favourite character of them all is definitely Thimble. I would love to read more about Thimble, to be honest, and yeah, really glad that I read this one. It's definitely one that I would reread, and I may reread it towards the end of December because I think it's a good Christmas wintry read as well. I have to apologise because I think someone outside is doing construction and I can't hold off on doing this video, so we're going to power through and hopefully it's not too annoying. Another honourable mention that I wanted to talk about is the Hexfall series. So I read these years ago when I first started YouTubing and book blogging and absolutely loved them, and then I was thinking about unhauling them, but I wanted to give them a quick reread just in case I could still get into them, and I wanted to make sure that I definitely wanted to lose them because I think they're probably quite hard to get hold of now, the original hardbacks at least. And so I reread the first one and then marathoned the entire trilogy and gave the last 2 books 5 stars. It's honestly an incredible YA paranormal series which follows a young girl who is a witch, and she is struggling to control her powers, so she is sent to Hexhall, which is a boarding school for paranormal teenagers. And then she finds out that things aren't really as they seem, there are lots of secrets there, and she needs to solve a few mysteries. So I think this book series is honestly incredible. It made me want to pick up every single book that Rachel Hawkins has written now, and I've been reading through her adult books, which they're fine, they're all right, but I really want to go back and read her YA because I think this YA series in particular was so good. She did write a spin-off book, and then something weird happened with her publisher, and she doesn't like to talk about it online, but I think they dropped the series, and so she never wrote any more in this world, which is a real shame because it's honestly incredible, and I think modern day readers would really enjoy it as well. There's also The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. I read this one sometime around Halloween. This is obviously the original source material for the Hill House TV show, and it's very, very different. This one is about a woman called Eleanor, or Nellie, and she is contacted by someone called Dr. Montague. He wants her and a couple of other people to come over to Hill House and prove that it's haunted and kind of do a little bit of an experiment, stay there for a few weeks and just live in the house. So Nellie, who is not having the best time in life at the moment, takes her sister's car and goes over to Hill House, and there are 2 other people there as well as Dr. Montague. There's Theodora and Luke. None of them are related, in case you've seen the TV show and are wondering. Things start to go downhill from there. It's a very, very good book. It's very confusing, and it's definitely one that I would like to reread and really absorb or reabsorb because I was really into it the first time that I read it. But I feel like there's a lot of context, subtext and stuff that I could really pick out upon a reread, so I'm keeping this one on my shelf. Can't wait to reread it next year. Another Ruth Sepsi's book I have is Between Shades of Grey. So this is the graphic novel version of her debut that I was telling you about earlier, and so I picked this up because it's been on my wish list for ages. I just really wanted to read it. So this follows the story of I think 15-year-old called Lena, who is living in Lithuania, and this is during World War II. Her family is taken from Lithuania to Siberia to a work camp. And again, this is a topic that I didn't really know anything about. I didn't know anything about Lithuanian history. I didn't even know they were, I know it sounds silly, involved in World War II in any way, but obviously it's World War II for a reason. That was just me being silly, but I really appreciate Ruth Sepsi's introducing me to the history of this country. I would really like to visit Lithuania one day and visit a bunch of historical sites. So this book does mainly take place in Siberia. It's heartbreaking. I love the characters. The main character and her sibling are just a joy to read about, and I just really enjoyed rereading this book in graphic novel format. Then we have Did I Ever Tell You This by Sam Neill. I read this as an audiobook. This is Sam Neill's memoir, or autobiography I suppose. He narrates the audiobook and he talks through his entire life from when he was born in the UK and then moved to New Zealand and grew up there as an English boy and then obviously became an actor. And Sam Neill is one of my all-time favourite actors because Jurassic Park is my all-time favourite film. I've been following his career sort of as much as I could as someone who is much younger than him and was born around the time of Jurassic Park when he was already an established actor. And unfortunately Sam Neill does have cancer, and that's kind of what pushed him to release this book. So I'm really appreciative that he did. It was such an interesting book. He talked about the films that he worked on, all the behind the scenes stuff. He kind of skimmed over Jurassic Park, which was sad because that's a lot of the reason why I picked this up. I wanted to know more about what happened on that set. I understand that he didn't want to just focus on Jurassic Park because he has had such a varied career that he didn't want to just focus on that one film. If you're going to read this, I would highly recommend listening to it as an audiobook. I thought it was fantastic. I also really want to mention The Lies of the Ajongo. So this is a short novella from Tor. It's the first in a series. This is getting louder and louder, I'm so sorry. So the second book is coming out next year. This is about a boy who has grown up in a city with no water. One day, to save his mother, he has to go out into the desert to try to find water and bring it back, or to tell the people of the city where the water is and where it can be found. He goes out into the desert and then he realises that things may not be exactly as he has been told. People may have been lying to him, so he starts discovering other things about this country or continent that he lives on. I loved this book. I wanted this to be a full novel, and that's the only reason why I didn't give this 5 stars. It's honestly incredible. I loved reading about the main character, whose name of course I can't remember, and following his journey through the desert and meeting all of the other characters along the way and discovering these secrets alongside him. It was such a good book, and I believe it's a debut, and I'm really impressed. So I'm really excited that I have the next book from NetGalley, and I'm hoping to read that soon, maybe over Christmas when I'm off work. I also wanted to mention in the Sheets graphic novel series. I've read all 3 of them now and they're absolutely wonderful. The first one follows a young girl who has lost her mother and her father is quite clearly in a state of depression. The main character is about 13, I think, and she's having to run her family's laundromat. She is running into issue after issue. Obviously she's only a 13-year-old, she shouldn't be expected to deal with this, so she's struggling through that. And then she meets a ghost who takes the form of a sheet because he travels from his ghost world to the human world, and that's just how ghosts appear in the human world, as sheets. And it's just a really cute middle grade story about them meeting and helping each other. I would highly recommend it. It's a lovely graphic novel series and really heartwarming as well. I feel like I can't make it through this video without mentioning Fourth Wing. So this I've put in the honourable mentions category because I only gave it 4 stars, and while I couldn't stop reading it while I read it, I do acknowledge that it's not the most well-written book, and I don't think it should win any awards necessarily, apart from the Goodreads Choice Award. It's not the best book, but it's a good romantasy book that keeps you on the edge of your seat, and I have come to really care about the characters, so I had to include this. I'm not including Iron Flame because I didn't love it, and I have such conflicting feelings about it. I've done a whole review of Iron Flame on my channel. You can see there, the way I'm talking about it, I'm just so confused, and I still am about how to feel about that book. We have another thriller book called Drowning. This one is about a plane crashing into the ocean and then the plane sinking with some survivors still inside. This author used to be a flight attendant, and she has written 2 plane related thrillers so far, and this is my favourite from her. I thought that this one was a very captivating thriller. I was on the edge of my seat the entire time. I felt like I was running out of air alongside these characters, and I really enjoyed reading about the father, daughter and separated wife relationship. I think that the author wrote a really good family dynamic there, which was complicated and heartbreaking. So I wanted to mention this book because it's very, very good. I didn't give it 5 stars because it's not quite an all-time favourite, but it's a very, very good thriller, survival thriller if you want that kind of thing. Dust Child. So this one is another historical fiction book by this author. It's not my favourite by her, which is why this isn't in the favourite section, but it is still very, very good. So this follows a bunch of characters, the first one being the child, who is now an adult, of an American soldier and a Vietnamese woman. He knows he's the son of an American soldier because he is mixed race. He's quite clearly black and not full Vietnamese, and so he has always been kind of picked on because of his skin colour, and he wants to get over to America because he knows he's part American and find a new life there, and so he's struggling through the whole immigration process. And then it also flashes back to the time of the Vietnam War and follows an American soldier and a Vietnamese woman, mostly the Vietnamese woman to be fair, who is working in what is essentially a brothel for American soldiers, and it follows her. She leaves her family home, goes to work there, and then meets an American soldier. This is honestly an incredible book. I loved it so much. It's just not quite there as an all-time favourite for me. It's heartbreaking, and again this is another historical book that introduces me to a period of history that I don't really know much about. We never really learned about the Vietnam War in school, and we certainly didn't learn about it from a Vietnamese person's perspective, which is silly. So I'm really glad that I have discovered this author and I get to read through her works, and I hope that she releases more books around this time period because I find them very educational and heartwarming overall and also very heartbreaking. So I love this author's writing and I would highly recommend this book. And now we're on to my favourite books of the year. I have 10 here to talk about, which is perfect. I didn't intentionally have a top 10 or create a top 10, but that's what's happened and I'm so pleased with myself. I have tried to put these in some kind of order, but to be honest they'll probably sort of move about a little bit because I can't do it. They're my favourite books of the year and I cannot be expected to rank them that way. So in spot number 10 we have Belladonna by Adeline Grace. This is a gothic YA fantasy romance book, I would say. So this follows a woman whose name I can't remember. She's a teenager. Her name is Signa. Death basically follows her around. So basically her parents died when she was younger and she has gone to live with various relatives, all of which have died in various ways, and so she is kind of being passed from like house to house. The next family members she goes to live with are the Hawthorns. The mother died fairly recently, I think, and the daughter is sick, and so there's also the father and the son who turn out to be like her uncle, aunt and 2 cousins. She gets there and she realises that this is a bit of a mystery because someone might be making one of her cousins sick, so she starts looking into that. Not only that, she seems to have some sort of like death magic. She can do various things, but also she can talk to death, like the human embodiment of death, and it's a ship and I love it. It's so good. I have also read the sequel and I didn't love it as much. I thought this one was much more atmospheric and the pacing was just better. So I would highly recommend this one. I'm probably going to give this one 4.5 stars. It's not quite a 5, but upon a reread it might be. It's very, very good. So Belladonna by Adeline Grace. Then we have Wandering Souls. This one is a book about Vietnamese refugees. It follows a family who are kind of broken apart. Half of the family goes off to England first, and they have to travel by boat to get over to the UK eventually, and then the other half of the family plan to follow later. The first group do make it, the second group do not, and unfortunately die. And so the book follows the first group of characters who go through the asylum process in the UK and try to settle into this whole new culture without really knowing much about it. And also one of the children from the first group who passed away, his ghost or spirit sort of kind of follows them as the wandering soul, because this is related to Vietnamese mythology and beliefs. And it's just such an incredible book. I loved it so much. This was nominated for, I think, the Women's Prize, and that's why I read this. It's the only reason I know about it, because I haven't really seen many people pick it up and talk about it. But if you like historical fiction and you want to learn more about Vietnamese history and culture, then I would highly recommend picking this one up. It is heartbreaking. It's very, very good. I gave this one 5 stars. Then we have Wrong Place, Wrong Time by Gillian McAllister. This is a time travel murder mystery thriller. It follows the main character, whose name is, doesn't say on the back. She's a mum to a teenage boy, and she looks out of her window one night as her teenage boy is coming home late, and she sees him kill a man, and then he gets arrested, and then she keeps going one day back in time to kind of figure out what happened and what led to her son becoming a murderer. And it's so twisty and interesting. There are also flashback scenes or some sort of like parallel timeline, we think, which follows a man who is a police officer, and you get a bit confused about how he fits into the story, but in the end everything comes together, and it's such a good book. I love this one so much. I would highly recommend it. I gave this one 5 stars. It's definitely one that I would like to reread. I don't often reread thrillers. Go and pick this one up. In the 7th spot we have What Lies in the Woods by Kate Alice Marshall. She is back again. Like I said, she's one of my all-time favourite authors. She writes such good books, and this is her adult thriller debut. This one follows a woman who has a very tragic past. I don't really want to talk about it too much because it might spoil things, but basically something happened in the woods in her town when she was younger, and they have been holding some secrets back from everyone else. They may not have told the full story when they were younger, and that's all I'm going to say about it. It's very mysterious. I do think that this is very similar to some real life cases, or so I've heard. I don't know which ones, so I don't know if the author sort of copied what happened in real life or used it as inspiration, or what happened. Maybe she's never heard of these cases. I'm not really sure, but I love this book. It was so good, and I love Kate Alice Marshall's writing. She is releasing a new thriller book in January, I think, next year, and I can't wait to pick it up. Okay, and then I have 2 sets of graphic novel series to talk about because I discovered these back in February and absolutely love them. The first series that I want to talk about is Giant Days. This is a very short graphic novel series. I think there are like 12 volumes or something, and it follows the main characters. There are 3 best friends who share a dorm in university, and it follows them from their first year all the way up to their graduation, and it just follows their antics and drama and everything, and I love this so much. I didn't go to university myself, so I couldn't relate to a lot of it, but I could definitely relate to like their feelings and their friendships and stuff. So I love this series so much, and it just gets better the more you read because you're more connected to the characters, and I think you come to really understand them and kind of what they're about and what's affecting them. So yeah, really enjoy this series, would highly recommend it. And then the other graphic novel series I discovered in 2023 was Lore Olympus. I love this series so much. So I read the first, I think, 3 from the library when I was trying to read 28 books in 28 days, and I very much enjoyed them. And then I carried on reading the webcomic because it was free, and now I'm behind again, but I was caught up at one point and I completely marathoned the entire thing because it was absolutely fantastic. So this is a Hades and Persephone retelling. It follows them right from the start of their story, and it's kind of modernised as well. For example, Olympus is a city. These characters have phones and cars and stuff, but all of the mythology is still there. It's very good, and I'd highly recommend it. I do think the first couple of volumes are the weakest. The first one in particular wasn't really made for print, I don't think. The art style just doesn't really work as well on paper as it does in the webcomic. It's just not as bright, and I really struggled with some of the artwork because I was sort of reading it like this, trying to figure out what was going on in some of the panels. But later on, the author obviously knew that her work would be adapted into print, so she, I think, kept that in mind when she was drawing all of these. In the 4th spot, we have Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez. Originally, I did have Part of Your World here, which is the first book in the series, but then I read this and I loved it even more, so I've swapped it out. This one follows a woman called Brianna, who is an ER doctor, and she meets another ER doctor who joins her hospital, whose name is Jacob. And initially, she's not a huge fan because he's acting weird, but then it turns out that he has social anxiety, so it's understandable. And the 2 of them agree to fake date. because he gets himself into a bit of a situation. This book is absolutely heartwarming and lovely. There's a bit of a twist at the end that I didn't absolutely love because I don't think it should have been a twist, but at the same time I don't really want to tell you what it is because maybe other people will find it twisty and worthwhile, but go and look up some reviews if you're interested in what the twist is. But I loved following these two characters. It's told from both of their points of view. I love getting to know them. They're both absolutely wonderful, and I love their drama and their heartbreak and their relationships with each other and also other people. It's an incredible read, so I'd highly recommend reading this one. And then we're down to a top 3. See if you can guess which books I'm going to put in here. If you've been following my channel for a while, then you probably know at least one of them, I reckon, because it should be obvious. So first of all, in spot number 3, we have The No-Show by Beth O'Leary, and can you believe a contemporary almost romance book is in my top 3? Because I cannot. I stumbled over romance because it's not really a romance book. This is basically just a contemporary book. On the back it implies that it's about 3 women who are stood up by the same man on Valentine's Day. Without spoiling anything, this book is about so much more than that. I absolutely loved following the 3 women's points of views. I loved getting to know the guy as well who was standing them up, because the reason he was doing what he was doing is a lot deeper than it initially seems, and I love that. I love hating a character first of all and then getting to know that maybe there's something else going on, and I just misunderstood the situation. I made assumptions, and that's such a bad thing for me to do. You shouldn't assume this about people, but at the same time it's hard not to, because the author was manipulating you to think a certain way. I love this book. I sobbed so hard at around the, I don't know, 280 page mark all the way up until the end. Her books keep making me cry, and I think Beth O'Leary is one of my favourite authors. Honestly, her books are incredible. I'm waiting on her newest release to come in from the library, and it's still, I think I'm like 4th or 5th in line. It's taking absolutely forever, so I'm not going to get to it this year, but I hope it comes in soon because I cannot wait. But this one, 5 stars, absolutely amazing, and definitely my 3rd favourite of the year. In spot number 2, we have Queen of Shadows by Sarah J Maas. So I marathoned the entire series this year. I had previously read up to and including Queen of Shadows, so this one was a reread. I was a bit worried that I wasn't going to love it as much as I loved it before. I stayed up all night reading this the first time, and then the second time, I think I did the same thing. I have tabbed this so much, and I'm probably going to tab it some more when, not if, I reread it. I just love this book. I think it brings everything together so well. None of the other books in this series really live up to it. I think this is like peak Sarah J Maas writing. She's clearly thought about everything so well, and this is the book that everything comes together and then everything kicks off and everything explodes, and it's just, yeah, it's amazing. Learning more about all the characters that you've been following up until this point is just wonderful, and I think it's honestly a masterpiece. Is that too much for a Sarah J Maas book? It might be. I don't think she has ever done better than this. So this is my 2nd favourite book of the year, even though it's a reread, even though it's Sarah J Maas. I really enjoyed it. And then that means my favourite book of the year is, of course, The Adventures of Mina Al-Sarafi by Shannon Chakraborty. This is by the author of the City of Brass trilogy, which is one of my all-time favourites, and she released a new book, the start of a new series, and it's absolutely incredible. So this follows a woman who is in her 40s, which you don't really see much of in fantasy, first of all, and she is a retired pirate captain. Her name is obviously Amina. She has a daughter, and she lives with her daughter and her mum in the countryside in a sort of broken down house, and she's trying to keep her daughter away from the pirate life that she has retired from. And then one day someone comes knocking on her door asking her to do one last job. She will pay her enough to retire for good, and so Amina is like, well, I kind of have to take it because my house is falling apart. I need to provide for my daughter. I need to give her a safe life, and by doing this last job I can definitely do that. And also I kind of want to go back to sea because Amina is a pirate at heart. So Amina then travels and kind of gets the band back together. There's also obviously an overarching plot. You learn more about what the job was that the woman wanted Amina to do and the background behind it. You learn more about Amina's background and the crew. It's honestly incredible. I loved seeing her build up this crew again and going to find everyone. I love the secrets that were revealed about her background and her history. There's a ship in here which not everyone is going to love, but I thought it was complicated and dark, and it was great. It's honestly an incredible book, and I would highly recommend it. I loved it so much that I bought 2 copies. This is the, I think, Fairy Loot edition. I'm not entirely sure because I got it from eBay because it was damaged, but the only damage was this on the back cover, so I just need to glue that back down and it's going to be perfect. But it's a stunning book. You can see here hopefully that this map is foiled, absolutely gorgeous, and then it's got this on the back, so obviously I had to buy it when I found it on eBay for very cheap because it's my favourite book of the year, and I do need to get my hands on the US edition so I can complete my collection. Shannon Chakraborty did say that she's not releasing the second book, the sequel, in 2024. She's thinking 2025 because she's had a really tough year, but she has said that each book in this series should follow like a kind of different theme. So I think the next one she said is kind of like a haunted house situation, and I'm very intrigued to see where that goes because that's going to be very different to this, because this first book is set in the Middle East, on the seas. I can't remember the year or anything, it's like the 1400s or something. You can see here that it's set in the Indian Ocean. So this haunted house thing, I have no idea how that's going to go, but I'm very excited. So I absolutely adore this book. Please go and pick it up if you haven't already. It might be a little bit different to what you're used to reading. This author writes such good characters. I don't think most people will mind, and I love it. It's so good. 10 out of 10. So those are my favourite books of the year. Hopefully I gushed about them enough that you now want to go and pick them all up. I obviously have a lot of genres in here, so there's probably something for everyone. Just, you know, scroll back and have a look. Let me know if you have read any of these and if you loved them. Don't tell me if you hated them because I don't want that kind of negativity on my best books video this time around. Save that for the worst books video. I give you full permission to go all out on my worst books of the year video if you want to. But for now, join me in telling me all about your favourite books of the year. I would love to know what your favourite book of 2023 was. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll speak to you all in my next video. Bye.